I woke again at 4:12 a.m. to the full-throated wail of the town's tornado sirens. Their metallic voices poured through my open window in ragged waves, shivering the glass and thrumming inside my chest like a second pulse. The clock on my nightstand still blinked the same obscene minute it had shown yesterday, and the day before that, 4:12, though the little plastic radio beneath it reported a calm night, clear skies, no storms within 100 miles. Summer air settled over my sheet-damp skin, thick with the unmoving warmth that comes just before dawn. I stared at the cracked ceiling and tried to slow my breathing, but my lungs insisted on dragging in air too fast, as if I'd run a mile. I already knew why. The same dream, had ended the instant the sirens began. Red sky, the color of overripe cherries stretching from horizon to horizon. A scorch of iron in the air strong enough to sting the back of the throat, and rooftops, rows upon rows of them, as though the whole town had flattened itself into a single shingled plain beneath a furious twilight. Something moved up there. Not a bird, not a cat, too many limbs, too many joints bending the wrong way. Its silhouette flitted along ridge lines and chimney stacks with frantic speed, claws scratching on asphalt tiles. The sound so real I expected it to rain dust and grit onto my face. Each night I tried to force my eyes to look directly at it, and each night the dream yanked my gaze away at the last moment, leaving only the clatter of its passage and the certainty that it was searching for something. Searching for me. When the sirens shattered the sky, the creature stilled, pivoted its head, or whatever served as a head, toward the noise, and everything went black. Then I woke, gasping. Outside, porch lights flicked on one by one, firefly bursts across the neighborhood. I heard front doors unlatch, feet thump across wooden steps, voices buzzing with the broken cadence of people still half asleep yet desperate for answers. That was new. The first morning, most of us had hidden behind curtains, embarrassed to admit we were frightened of a false alarm. The second morning, curses drifted over lawns as folks phoned the county, demanding someone fix the glitch. By the third, resignation settled in like fog. The sirens would scream, we'd roll over, life would stumble on. Tonight, this morning, resignation was gone. Fear had chewed through it. I pulled on jeans and boots, grabbed the flashlight I kept by the dresser, and stepped into the hallway. My black lab, Bishop, pressed against my leg, ribs vibrating with a low growl. He'd hardly barked since he was a pup, but the sirens put a tremor in him I'd never seen. I rubbed the ruff of his neck, and the growl faded to a wineglass hum of unease. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked toward 4:15, and still the sirens held their note. 3 minutes. Most tests ran for 60 seconds. Tornado warnings, when real, lasted longer, but everyone in Denton Hollow knew the sky stayed black and untroubled above us. My phone lit with message after message, neighbors group chat. Any wind? Clear as glass here. Check your roof. Something's up there, swear to God. At the last line, my stomach sank. I pushed out the back door onto the deck. Bishop followed, hackles raised. Pale moonlight washed the yard. Beyond the wooden fence stood the row of modest homes I'd known my entire life. My beam swept over lawn chairs, flower beds, a garden hose coiled like a sleeping snake. Nothing. I raised the light to my own roof. Shingles glimmered silver, undisturbed. The sirens cut off mid-blare, snapped silent, as if a knife had sliced the sound in two. In the ringing hush that followed, the neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Crickets had gone mute. Not a leaf stirred. Bishop's ears flattened. He stared past me, toward the front of the house. A hard thud traveled through the wood beneath our feet, like something heavy dropping onto the front porch. Bishop lurched forward, barking now. Deep, frantic. I sprinted after him through the living room. Another thud, this one accompanied by a slithering scrape across shingles. A thought flashed. On the roof, just like the dream. Something's on the roof. I threw the front door open. Cool air rolled in, carrying the metallic tang I'd tasted in sleep. The porch was empty, but above, a shape clung to the eave, silhouetted by the street lamp across the road. It was spindly yet thick-muscled, arms too long, ribcage heaving like bellows. The head was wrong, flat and wide, flaring at the sides as though someone had stretched a bat's face over a human skull. Its skin, or perhaps hide, looked mottled, the color difficult to name beneath sodium light. Bishop barked so hard his paws lifted from the boards. The creature twisted its head toward us, black glassy eyes reflecting the porch light. A wet clicking issued from its throat. It shifted its weight, claws rasping on gutter metal, then launched across the gap between houses with whip-crack speed, landing on Mrs. Dillard's roof in a sprawl of elbows and knees. It vanished beyond the ridgeline. My flashlight lay forgotten in my hand, beam quivering on the vinyl siding. Bishop whined and pressed against my legs so hard it almost toppled me. I forced breath into my chest, tasting rust. The sirens were done, but the real nightmare, the old warning said, had begun. By breakfast time, rumors bloomed like dandelions. At the diner, someone swore they'd found gouges in their shingles, 4 neat parallel trenches running from the peak to the gutter. Another said their attic smelled like a butcher's shop. Sheriff Ed Marbury set up a folding table near the register and scribbled statements in a yellow pad while his deputy poured stale coffee. Ed kept saying vandals and reckless kids, but the words dulled every time they left his mouth. We'd all seen the same dream. Some had seen the shape on the roof after. Denial couldn't stretch far enough to cover that. Kara, who managed the siren controls at the county office, arrived red-eyed and trembling. "System log says manual activation," she whispered, as though the sirens might still hear her, but no one turned the key. I checked the cameras. Control room's empty all night. Her hands shook so badly I guided her to a booth. She told me she'd dreamed of red skies and a sound like roof tiles cracking. When the sirens cut out, she woke to the noise of her cat yowling at the ceiling and found claw marks in the sheetrock near the attic hatch. That afternoon, the wind rose for the first time in days, a hot gust that carried the smell of something long dead on the highway. Dust devils skittered along Main, and everyone's eyes kept sliding toward the rooftops. I sat on my porch with Bishop and a pair of binoculars, scanning shingles and chimneys. Nothing moved but the weather vane atop the volunteer fire station. When clouds bunched low in the west, the sense of pressure lessened, almost as though the town itself exhaled. I told myself storms were on the way. Maybe the sirens had sensed a pulse of weather satellites hadn't. Fool's comfort, but I clung to it. At dusk, I hammered plywood over the attic vent and sprinkled mothballs along the eaves, an old trick my grandfather swore deterred raccoons. I doubted it would deter whatever I'd seen, yet the act of doing something, anything, steadied the tremor in my spine. Bishop refused to climb the stairs with me. He sat by the doorway, staring upward, whining through clenched teeth. Night fell, starless and heavy. I lay in bed, boots on, flashlight laced through my belt. Bishop curled against the bedroom door. 3:58 a.m. The minutes limped past. My eyelids drifted down. I fought them open. 4:09. The house was so quiet I heard my own pulse. 4:11. My hand closed on the flashlight. 4:12. Silence. The sirens did not wail. For one staggering second, relief burst through me. Maybe it was over. A brief madness cured by its own violence. Then Bishop's head jerked up, lips peeling from his teeth. From outside came a soft patter, like fingers drumming on glass. Another, heavier thump answered, nearer. Something was on the roof again, and this time the sirens weren't there to drown it. The dream's red horizon flashed behind my eyelids, and I realized the thing had used the noise as cover, hunting while the town cowered indoors, trusting the drill. Now, without warning, the hunt would be easier. Wood creaked overhead, dust sifted from the ceiling's edge. Bishop barked once, sharp enough to make my ears ring, and the scuttling paused. I swung out of bed and slipped into the hallway. A shadow crossed the skylight, blotting moonlight. Talons scraped shingles. Whatever perched above was heavier than any raccoon, heavier than me. I flicked the flashlight off to avoid advertising my position, and felt my way toward the attic pull-down. My plan, if half-formed terror qualifies as a plan, was to pop the hatch, scream like hell, and hope the sudden noise drove the creature into the street where someone, anyone, might get video proof. But before I could tug the cord, plaster cracked, A claw punched through in a shower of white dust. Another followed, carving a jagged tent. The drywall sagged. Bishop howled. I staggered back as the ceiling gave way in a ripping burst. A shape dropped into the hallway, a kinked spider of limbs, back-arched, head swiveling as though on a hinge. The stench of damp fur and iron flooded the space. It crouched there, between me and the stairs, breath rasping like bellows dragged across gravel. In the quivering half-light, I saw its skin wasn't skin at all, but a patchwork of plates, overlapping like roof shingles, their edges serrated. The creature pivoted, fixing those glassy black eyes on me. The flat skull flared wider, and a fan of ridged cartilage rose behind it, unfolding like a grotesque hood. It opened its mouth, not jaws, but 4 separate mandibles hidden until that moment, revealing a dark pit lined with teeth no bigger than sewing needles, yet there were hundreds. It clicked them together, and the sound, short, deliberate, sent Bishop skidding back into my bedroom. I raised the flashlight and thumbed it on, beam stabbing the creature's face. It hissed and recoiled, forelimbs slapping the floorboards, claws carving trenches. Seizing the moment, I bolted for the stairs. The thing lunged, claws raking my calf, but the boot leather held. I hit the bottom step, lost footing, tumbled, shoulder slamming wall. Pain flared white. Upstairs, the creature shrieked, a banshee cry that peeled paint, then tore after me, limbs thundering. I twisted onto my back, flashlight still in hand, and shone it full into the stairwell. The creature halted mid-descent, eyes awash in white glare. Its plates rippled, darkening to a charcoal that swallowed light. It chittered, jerked aside, as though weighing whether the prey was worth the burn. I crab-crawled toward the front door, fumbling for the deadbolt. The metallic click was deafening. The creature slammed into the door the instant I cracked it. Wood splintered, hinges shrieked. I stumbled onto the porch, flashlight whipping across the yard. 20 feet away stood another of them, hunched on all fours atop my mailbox, plates shining rain-slick in moonlight. It raised its head, no, 3 heads fused along the jawline, and issued a low warble. From farther down the block, the call echoed back. Sirens or not, Denton Hollow was no longer sleeping. Lights flared behind curtains, a screen door banged open. Someone screamed. Then the night filled with thuds on shingles as if an army of claws had found purchase. The creature on my stairs retreated, not into the house, but up, onto the roof, launching from gutter to gutter until it vanished behind the neighbor's chimney. The one on the mailbox scurried across the lawn, skittering sideways like a crab, disappearing into the shadows between houses. I stood barefoot on the porch, panting, shoulder screaming, calf bleeding through torn denim. Bishop barked inside, trapped by the broken staircase. Across the street, Mrs. Dillard's second-floor window shattered outward, showering the lawn with glass. A long arm followed, groping for the drain pipe. She shrieked my name. Around us, Denton Hollow burst open like a hive. The sirens had stayed silent, but the roof crawlers had not. I vaulted the porch steps and bolted into the street, every step igniting fresh pain in my shoulder and leg. Mrs. Dillard was still screaming, her voice shrill and cracking, more terrified than I'd ever heard from her in 30 years of neighborly chit-chats and yard sales. The second-floor window gaped like a broken mouth. A gray, ridged limb slithered out, groping downward, claws gripping the drain pipe. The creature hadn't leapt. It was lowering itself slowly, methodically, like it wasn't in a rush because it didn't need to be. Her porch light flicked on, casting fractured illumination over the yard, and I saw it in full. This one was longer than the one that had crashed through my attic. Its body, if it could be called that, seemed to stretch and uncoil as it descended, vertebrae shifting beneath plate-like armor that shimmered in the light like oil on wet pavement. Its limbs didn't bend like a spider's or a lizard's, but with a horrible elasticity, like there were extra joints added at random. It didn't glance at me. I wasn't its concern. I shouted up at her, "Get out of the house through the front door, now!" But all I saw were her hands clawing at the curtains frozen. Behind her, more shadows twisted on the ceiling, far more than just one. There wasn't time. I sprinted up her steps, shoulder slamming into the door just as it began to open. Mrs. Dillard staggered back, mouth open to yell at me. But the words died on her tongue the moment the sound of claws tapping against hardwood reached her ears. I grabbed her by the elbow and yanked her outside. She screamed again, not at me, but at the ceiling just behind me. I didn't look. We ran. Something hit the doorframe behind us, and the wood split with a crack. Another slam followed, and the whole door tore loose, flipping out into the yard like it had been ejected. Mrs. Dillard tripped over her own porch steps, and I grabbed her arm again, dragging her across the lawn. One of the creatures vaulted from the broken window above, landed hard behind us, and skittered forward in that awful jerking gait. I turned and blasted it in the face with the flashlight. It shrieked. Not a pain shriek, not one of rage either, just sound, flat and cold, like it didn't know what screaming was supposed to feel like. It flinched, hood flaring, then retreated 3 paces, blinking in the beam. But others were coming. More screams erupted along the block. The neighbors were waking up one by one to find the same creatures descending on them. Some were still on roofs. Some were slithering down walls. Some crawled beneath cars and fences like they were boneless. One of them was crawling headfirst down the side of a telephone pole. "Get inside," I shouted, turning toward my house. "Basement now." We didn't make it back to mine. The moment I stepped onto the sidewalk, 2 more figures appeared from the shadows between the hedges across the street. Their motion wasn't fluid, it was stuttered, like their bodies reset positions between each step, heads jerking into new angles every time I blinked. Mrs. Dillard froze again. This time I wasn't sure I could make her move. "Go," I hissed. "That way, cut across the lawns." She didn't move. Her mouth hung open, breath shuddering. One of the creatures hissed and twitched forward. I raised the flashlight again, swept it across their faces. The beam caught the first one in the eyes and it stopped cold, but the second one rushed me. No warning, no sound. I barely got the light up in time to catch it full in the face. It didn't scream. It simply reared back, turned away, and vanished behind a neighbor's fence like it had simply lost interest. That's when I knew for sure they didn't like light. They weren't blind, but they didn't like it. It made them hesitate. I turned back to Mrs. Dillard. "We need to go now." She finally nodded, trembling, and we staggered across the yard to the Brunner house next door. The place was dark. I slammed my hand against the door. No answer. I slammed again. Finally, a light flicked on in the hall window. An old man's voice shouted, "Who is it?" "Me, it's Ben. Open the door." The lock turned, and the door creaked open. Mr. Brunner peered out through a chain. "What the hell is—" A shadow passed behind him. I didn't think. I slammed my boot into the door and knocked it wide open, the chain snapping. Mr. Brunner stumbled back, shouting, just as one of the creatures lunged from the hallway. It had been on the ceiling. It landed on the floorboards in a sprawl of limbs and turned its eyeless face toward us, hood flaring wide. I grabbed Mrs. Dillard and shoved her through the doorway, bracing to slam it shut again. But the creature didn't chase us. It turned on Mr. Brunner. He screamed. The sound was wet and sudden. I turned the flashlight on the creature, but it was already climbing the wall, vanishing into the kitchen. I yanked Mrs. Dillard past the couch into the hallway and down the basement steps. The smell hit us first. Not rot, soil, like something had dug down here, earth damp and disturbed. I fumbled for the basement light and flipped the switch. Fluorescent bulbs flickered to life, revealing a cluttered mess of boxes, tools, and furniture, but no creatures, for now. I pushed a heavy set of shelves against the basement door, ignoring the shrill barking coming from upstairs. It wasn't Bishop. It was something else, mimicking barking like a recording played backward, then footsteps, then scratching. They were searching the house. Mrs. Dillard huddled behind the workbench, hugging herself, rocking back and forth. Her whisper was barely audible. They were on my ceiling. I never heard them climb in. I locked everything, but they were already there. "I know," I whispered back. "They've been watching. I think they only waited for the sirens to stop." And they had. The sirens were gone tonight, maybe permanently. Maybe whatever was controlling them had been overrun or turned off. That meant the creatures had free rein now, and they weren't just hunting anymore, they were moving in. We sat there in silence for what felt like an hour. Occasionally we'd hear the creak of boards, a faint tapping on the floor above, but no direct attempts to break through. They weren't in a hurry. I realized then, this wasn't a raid, this wasn't an attack, it was a process. The way termites work, the way rot spreads, quiet, invisible, until it's already too late. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I nearly dropped it. One bar of signal, a message from Kara at the county office. Don't go outside. They come from the rooftops first, but they move into the walls after. They learned the sirens. Something turned them off tonight. And then, it's not the town that's keeping them in. It's the air. The sirens weren't warning us. They were holding them back.
I stared at that message for a long time.
Then I looked up and saw the dust sifting down through the ceiling cracks. Something was above us again. A soft scrape echoed above us. Not footsteps, more like something dragging across insulation, nails raking wooden beams. Then, stillness, not silence. There was never silence anymore. I could hear Mrs. Dillard's breath catching in her throat, could hear my own heartbeat punching behind my ribs, could hear the occasional soft tick of shifting wood, like the house itself was nervous. But most of all, I could hear something listening. The dust settled again. Nothing broke through. I tried to believe that meant it had moved on, that maybe it had chosen a different house, another vent, another attic to slip inside. But I didn't believe it. Not really. I crouched by the workbench and tried to recall the layout of the neighborhood, who had basements, who didn't, who might be able to hold out. But the real problem wasn't surviving the night. It was what came next, because this wasn't one night. This was a new normal. Mrs. Dillard hadn't spoken for minutes. She sat cross-legged, arms wrapped tight around her stomach like she was trying to keep herself from shaking apart. "What are they?" she whispered at last. I didn't answer. I didn't know. They weren't here before the sirens, she went on. And now... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. We both knew. The sirens didn't cause them. They warned us. Or more than that, they restrained them. Maybe those cries had mimicked storms for a reason. Maybe something in that wail pushed them back, or paralyzed them, or drove them out. But now someone, or something, had shut them off. My phone buzzed again. New message. Kara. Radio towers dead. Siren signal disabled. Manual override locked. No one did it from here. Below that, county building has movement in the vents. We're barricading the control room. I don't think we'll last the night. And finally, tell everyone don't go to sleep. I stared at those words. They shouldn't have made sense, but they did. It wasn't just the rooftop crawlers. It was the dream, too. The red sky, the flat plain of houses. The thing that stared at me every time the sirens ended. What if we weren't dreaming it? What if that was real? Mrs. Dillard looked up. What is it? I read her the message. She closed her eyes and let out a breath that was halfway between a sob and a laugh. No sleep. That's not a plan. That's a death sentence. I nodded. Then we stay awake. Just for now, we survive the night. Figure out the rest tomorrow. If there is a tomorrow, she muttered. From above, a floorboard creaked, then another, heavy, deliberate. Closer to the top of the basement stairs, we both went silent. Then something began to scratch. Not wildly, not like an animal, but methodically, claw after claw, tracing the frame of the door, testing it, measuring it. The weight of that intent made my stomach turn. I rose slowly, flashlight in hand, and aimed it at the ceiling. The basement door rattled in its frame. Then the knob began to turn. It stopped after a quarter turn, stuck by the shelf I'd wedged against it. But the creature, or whatever was operating that doorknob, knew it now. It knew how we blocked it. It knew we were inside. Then came the worst sound I've heard in my life. A knock. 3 hard raps on the basement door, then silence. No scratching. No movement. We waited. I expected it to start slamming, or peeling the door away like the others had. But nothing came. I held my breath for what felt like forever. Still nothing. Mrs. Dillard looked at me, pale as milk. It knocked. I nodded. I heard, "They've never done that before." "No," I said. "They haven't." That scared me more than the shrieking. More than the way they moved. The knock meant it was watching, listening, waiting for a response. I sat back down and didn't move for a long time. Eventually, Mrs. Dillard fell asleep with her back to the cement wall. Her breathing stayed shallow, lips parted, fingers still twitching against her knees. I didn't wake her. I sat in the dark, flashlight in hand, and listened to the town come apart above us. Screams, then silence, a crash of glass, then more knocks, and something crawling in the walls. Around 6 a.m. the noise began to fade. By 6:15 even the scratching had stopped. At 6:25 I heard birds. At 6:30 sunlight pushed through the thin crack under the door. I rose and pressed an ear to the wood. Nothing. I waited 5 more minutes. Nothing still. I removed the shelf slowly, every muscle coiled. Then I opened the door. The house above was torn apart. The wallpaper peeled. Claw marks on the ceiling. Cabinets torn from walls. The back door stood wide open, breeze fluttering the screen like nothing had happened. A day like any other. But outside, rooftops shimmered faintly, like heat mirages. And I knew, without question, they hadn't left. They were waiting. And the sirens weren't coming back. I stepped out into the morning light like a man walking into a graveyard. The sun was up, the sky a brilliant pale blue streaked with the harmless feathers of cirrus clouds. But it was all wrong. Too clean, too calm. The town had been gutted during the night, but the air smelled like honeysuckle, like summer was still pretending everything was fine. Mrs. Dillard followed a few paces behind me. She didn't speak, just stared at the street with wide, dry eyes. Her slippers were coated in dust and dirt, her robe streaked with dried blood from Mr. Brunner's door. She wasn't crying anymore. There was a point where the body runs out of tears. The neighborhood didn't look like it had been attacked. Not exactly. From a distance, Denton Hollow still looked like itself. Quaint, quiet, stubbornly average. But the closer you got, the more you saw it, the little changes. Every roof was scarred, vents torn off, gutters mangled. Several attic windows were simply gone, shattered outward, shards still lying in the grass. A couple of front doors had been ripped clean from the hinges. On more than one porch, the paint was peeling in patterns that looked suspiciously like claw marks. Across the street, someone had spray-painted one word in red across their garage, "Stay awake." I clutched my phone, hoping Kara had messaged again. Nothing. Last text was still the one from just before the sirens fell silent. I tapped in a few messages, asked if she was okay, if anyone made it out of the county building, but they all sat unsent. No service now. Mrs. Dillard looked up. "What do we do now?" "Gather who we can," I said. "Figure out who's still alive. Regroup." She nodded slowly. "And after that?" I didn't have an answer. We started house to house. Some were empty. Some had been torn apart. In one, we found a man curled in a bedroom closet, eyes open, unmoving, but no blood on him. No wounds, just dead. I checked his pulse 3 times. He wasn't breathing. Mrs. Dillard noticed a smear of dried fluid under his nose, a reddish-brown trail from both nostrils. "His ears, too," she whispered. "Look, blood from the ears. That's what you see in people who've heard explosions." I didn't like what that meant. We moved on. At the DeMoss place, we found 3 survivors, young couple and their teenage niece. They'd locked themselves in the basement like we had, said they heard things all night. One of them claimed something had laughed at one point, but I wasn't sure I believed it. That sounded too human. The girl had bite marks on her leg, small, clean, just one perfect crescent of teeth, like a test. Not enough to cripple, just enough to mark her. We wrapped it up and told her to tell us the second she felt anything weird. The Andersons were gone, just gone. Front door open, chairs tipped over, table split in half, but no blood, no signs of a fight, just absence, like they'd been lifted out of their lives mid-step. By the end of the first hour, we'd gathered 9 people in all. Me, Mrs. Dillard, the DeMosses, their niece, a mailman named Victor, who claimed he saw one of the things slide down a stop sign like a snake, and 3 older women who lived on the far corner and had all survived by hiding under a pool table with meat cleavers in hand. They hadn't needed them. The creatures didn't enter their house. That, more than anything else, scared me, because it meant they chose. It meant some people weren't even worth killing. We regrouped at the diner. I had the keys. Most of the windows were intact. The gas burners still worked. We boiled coffee, gathered bottled water, shared whatever food we could find. For a while, it almost felt like normal life was staggering back to its feet. Then I checked the radio. I found a battery-operated crank model in the back. No power, but it didn't need it. Turned the dial through every frequency. Static, static. A few stations crackled in, all automated music loops, no voices. No weather alerts, no traffic, just one signal, barely audible, but consistent. A short tone repeating every 4 seconds, a kind of ping. It didn't match any emergency code I knew. Mrs. Dillard sat beside me. What is it? I don't know, but it's deliberate. We turned the volume up. Everyone listened. No one spoke, just that repeated ping. Like a sonar pulse. Then, just once, it skipped. A glitch or a response? Victor stared out the front window. What time is it? I looked down. 10:48. Sun's too high for that, he muttered. It was just barely up 20 minutes ago. I glanced outside. He was right. The light had changed. It was thicker. Not warmer, not brighter, just more present. Shadows stretched weirdly. Not longer, but sharper. Like the sun was more of a spotlight than a celestial object. Then we heard the scraping. Everyone froze. It came from the roof. Sharp, slow. A long dry drag. I killed the radio. Scrape, scrape. Victor stood up and pulled the blinds shut. One by one. I turned off the lights. The coffee stopped percolating, the pot clicking as it cooled. We sat in silence, breath held, ears straining. Scrape. And then, it stopped. We waited another 10 minutes. 15. Nothing. When I finally dared to peek through the blinds, the roof was empty. No one spoke until noon. By then, we knew the truth. They were still here. They didn't leave when the sun came up. They never left at all. We spent the rest of the day preparing, blocked the doors, covered the windows, made weapons, broom handles with knives duct taped to the ends, pans filled with hot grease, bottles of ammonia and spray bottles. Useless, probably, but doing something was better than sitting in fear. At 3:15, the shadows moved again. The clouds thickened. Everything looked redder than it had before. And the girl, the DeMoss's niece, stood up suddenly, eyes wide. What is it? I asked. She pointed at the far wall. There's a hole in the ceiling. There hadn't been. We followed her pointing finger. Sure enough, a round black gap in the plaster of the diner ceiling. Right at the corner, where the shadows were deepest. I climbed a stool, flashlight in hand, and aimed into the hole. Nothing. Just insulation. Then I heard it. A clicking sound. It was faint, distant, but it was repeating. A rhythm. 3 clicks. Pause. 3 clicks again. The girl gasped and backed away. That's the sound from my dream, she whispered. When the sky was red, that's what it made. I stepped down from the stool, cold sweat running down my sides. They're not just crawling on rooftops, I said. They're in the walls. I moved slowly toward the counter and grabbed the longest knife I could find, one of those old-fashioned carving blades we used for slicing pork shoulder. The handle was cracked and the edge dulled from years of being dragged across cheap plastic cutting boards, but I didn't care. It was steel, and I needed something to keep my hands from shaking. Everyone stared at the hole in the ceiling like it was a second sun. The red outside hadn't faded. It had deepened. By 4 p.m., the entire diner was lit with a sour, rust-colored light that filtered in through the grimy windows like blood through gauze. The walls looked diseased. Faces looked hollow. Even the metal fixtures seemed to turn a deeper, uglier shade. That sound from the hole kept going. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. Not loud, but deliberate. Not random. Too mechanical to be animal, but too wet to be electronic. The girl, her name was Mallory, I learned, stood behind the counter, white-knuckling a fire extinguisher, breathing too fast. I climbed back up on the stool, aimed the flashlight into the hole again, and leaned closer. I knew I shouldn't. I knew better. But something about the pattern was starting to loop in my brain like an unfinished sentence. I had to see if there was more to it. Just insulation, just drywall. Click, click, click. I blinked. For a half second, the space inside the hole shimmered, not like light moving, like skin flexing. I saw something ripple, like the walls themselves inhaled. Then it was gone. I nearly dropped the flashlight. "They're in the goddamn building," Mrs. Dillard spoke first. "Can we cover it? With what? I don't know. A tray? Foil? Something." We used a baking sheet and duct tape, slapped it flat over the ceiling like we were sealing a wound. The clicking stopped immediately. That silence wasn't comforting. It was worse. It was the kind of silence that waits for you to let your guard down. Victor stood near the front door, holding an old police baton he found in the kitchen. "We need a plan. We can't sit here all night again. They're watching us." "You saw one?" I asked. He nodded. "Through the window, right before you put up the foil. Wasn't moving. Just standing in the yard across the street, head cocked, like it was listening." The DeMosses started boarding up the back hallway. Mallory stayed close to her aunt, dragging her leg with that small crescent-shaped bite hidden under her jeans. No one said anything, but we all noticed how pale she was getting and how she kept looking up, as if something just behind the ceiling was talking to her in a language only she could hear. By sundown, the shadows outside had turned the color of coagulated blood. The streetlights didn't come on. One flickered for a few seconds, then burst. Glass rained onto the sidewalk. A moment later, we heard a low sound. The sirens were back on, but they didn't sound right. The pitch was lower, warped, like someone had taken the usual tornado alert and played it backward underwater. It didn't rise and fall. It undulated, like a warning from something that didn't understand how humans were supposed to hear. It came from everywhere, not just the towers. From inside vents, from cell phones, from radios, even though none were powered. The frequency vibrated our bones. Mallory screamed and clapped her hands over her ears. I turned to the radio behind the counter. It was off. Still, the speakers were humming. I grabbed it, yanked the batteries out. The humming kept going. And then we heard a sound above the roof. Multiple impacts. Dozens. They were back. The diner lights flickered, then died. I don't remember screaming, but someone did. In the dark, we moved fast. Everyone knew what to do now. Flashlights on. Get to the middle of the room. No walls at our backs. Watch the ceiling. Watch the windows. Stay away from the goddamn vents. The back hallway exploded in noise. One of the panels cracked. Something was inside the wall now. Not outside. Not above. In. A sharp screech rang out. Wood tearing from studs, and a claw burst through the paneling. 5 digits, each tipped with a nail the length of a steak knife, groped around in the air like a blind man feeling for a light switch. The hand twisted and flexed, then withdrew. Then a second one followed. This one wasn't shaped the same, thicker, more fingers, more joints. Something wet slapped the tile floor behind the wall. Mrs. Dillard screamed, not because of the thing in the wall, but because Mallory had fallen over. She was convulsing. Her eyes rolled back, her mouth opened, and from her throat came the same pattern we'd heard from the ceiling earlier. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, click. Then she sat up and whispered, "They don't come from the sky." We all froze. She blinked, looked at us, confused, then down at her leg. Blood was pouring from the bite. The veins around it had turned black. Victor grabbed a serrated knife and looked at me. "We need to cut it out." "No time," I said. "She's already—" Mallory stood up. She shouldn't have been able to. The way her leg twisted, the color of her face. But she moved with a jerky kind of coordination, like her bones didn't belong to her anymore. "She's not breathing," Mrs. Dillard whispered. I stepped between them, flashlight in one hand, knife in the other. "Mallory?" She tilted her head. Her jaw clicked. Her mouth twitched into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. "I hear them," she said. "They're hungry." Then she dropped to the floor. She didn't collapse, she dropped, like the gravity beneath her changed. A thud, and she was still. We didn't touch her. Behind the wall, the clicking started again. and from the rooftop, footsteps. Dozens. This wasn't random anymore. This was coordinated. They were coming for us all. We didn't move for a full minute. No one spoke. No one breathed loud enough to draw attention. The flashlight in my hand trembled, its beam skating across the linoleum to where Mallory lay crumpled. Her back rose once, just a slight spasm, and then stilled again. Behind us, the wall groaned. That same claw, 5 hooked blades the color of rusted copper, tore through the paneling and pulled a section of it clean off. Light from one of the flashlights caught the creature behind it full on, and for the first time, we saw what we were really dealing with. It was inside the wall, not behind it. The damn thing had no use for open rooms. Its body was long, jointed like a centipede, but stretched out like something built to live in crawl spaces. Segmented, boneless almost. It rippled through the structure of the building with disturbing ease, like it had molded itself to fit the town's blueprint. Its face was a flattened shield of skin, with no mouth and no visible eyes, only a vertical ridge that pulsated slowly like a vein. The claws weren't for grabbing. They were for digging. It didn't react to the light the way the others had. It just paused. Then the ridge split down the middle, and a sound came out. Not a roar, not a screech. It was a perfect copy of Mallory's voice whispering, "They don't come from the sky." Then all at once it rushed forward, the wall panel shattered into splinters. The creature surged into the hallway, first its forelimbs, then its massive torso, then the slithering trunk of its body. It hit the linoleum and scuttled sideways, its underbody gliding on hundreds of tiny chittering legs. Victor screamed and swung the baton, smashing it across what he thought was the head, but it bounced harmlessly off the ridged plating. Mrs. Dillard hurled a pot of boiling coffee. The scalding liquid splashed across the creature's flank. It squealed, a sharp, high-pitched pulse like a dentist's drill, and flinched backward, not from pain, from heat. I grabbed the extinguisher from behind the counter and fired it directly into the thing's face. A burst of white foam engulfed it. The creature spasmed and scrambled backward. Its body rippled in reverse as it slipped back into the hallway, back through the broken panel, into the wall. Gone, for now. Victor slammed the broken door shut and shoved a table against it. We all turned to Mallory. She was still lying there, pale, quiet, blood pooling beneath her, but something was wrong. The pool of blood wasn't spreading normally. It was seeping in only one direction, toward the drain in the kitchen, as if being pulled, and then her back arched. No breath, no pulse, just a violent, unnatural rise of the ribcage, like something was inside her trying to stretch. Her mouth fell open, and her jaw kept going, unhinging, cracking, until the bottom lip was nearly touching her collarbone, and from that hollow, gaping mouth something clicked. Not her voice, not a scream. It was the clicking again, but faster, faster. Victor moved first. He jammed a towel into her mouth. She didn't fight back. She didn't even blink. "Help me," he shouted. She's still alive, or something's inside her." "She's a beacon," I said, barely thinking. "They're using her." Mrs. Dillard's hands went to her ears. "We need to get out of here." But the moment she said it, the ceiling above us caved in. Not all at once, just a single hole, clean and silent, opening like a mouth. A long black limb dropped through, no sound, no warning. It swung low, jointed like a mantis's leg, and tapped the floor 3 times. Click, click, click. Every flashlight beam in the room trained on it. The limb retracted slowly, folding back into the ceiling. No attack, no retreat, just that sound. Victor looked at me. "They're toying with us." "No," I said. "They're testing. They're watching how we react." Because this wasn't just about killing. This was about learning, adapting. Every hour that passed, they were less like animals, more like something that had found a new place to nest or colonize. We couldn't stay. I grabbed a road map from the drawer by the register. No phones, no GPS. Nothing electric was working right anymore. Even the lights felt delayed, like there was a lag between flipping the switch and seeing the glow. "Nearest fire station is 5 miles east," I said. "Should have backup generators, radios, a signal tower." Victor nodded. "That's a start." "I'm not leaving her," Mrs. Dillard whispered. "We don't have a choice. I can't." We don't have a choice." She knelt beside Mallory, took her hand and whispered something, then stood, face like stone. "Let's go." We gathered what we could, flashlights, knives, cans of food, an extra extinguisher, and we left her. Mallory didn't move again, but the clicking followed us all the way out the back door. The moment we hit the street, the wind changed. We didn't hear it at first. We felt it. The sirens, long dead, weren't coming back. But something else was, low, subtle, almost like a whisper traveling through shingles and walls. It wasn't sound exactly, it was vibration. We looked up. All along the rooftops of Denton Hollow, dozens of shapes sat crouched, perfectly still, watching us, waiting. They didn't leap, they didn't rush us, but one of them raised its head and opened its mouth. A long, wet cord of flesh unspooled from it, dragging across the tiles. On the end of it was a human face. It blinked at us and whispered Mallory's voice, "Don't go, we're already inside." We ran. There was no vote, no hesitation, no final glance back at the diner. Once that face blinked at us from the end of that fleshy cord, her face, some ancient part of the brain took over. The part that doesn't reason, the part that just screams move. The street stretched ahead of us like a gauntlet. Cracked pavement, red glowing windows, the bones of old houses peeling in the dying light. Overhead, the rooftops teemed with watchers, those long hunched bodies frozen in place, legs folded beneath them like rotting gargoyles. They didn't chase, but they didn't have to. Because as we sprinted down Maple Drive, the town changed. Not drastically, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a puppet was being disassembled mid-play. A telephone pole leaned 20 degrees to the left, its wires looped downward like limp tendons. A front yard sprinkler gurgled up muddy water tinged with red. Mailboxes were open, not knocked over, just open, like they'd all been checked at the same time. And then there was the sky, no longer blue, not even red, just wrong. Like someone had taken a photo of the sky and printed it with a dyeing ink cartridge. Colors smudged, clouds half-formed, edges trailing into nothing. I saw birds, black smudges flapping overhead, but their wings didn't beat right. They glided in jerks, stuttered like frames skipping in a bad movie reel. None of us said anything. Behind us the rooftops clicked, faint at first, then louder, click, 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 and again, faster. It wasn't a chase, it was a countdown. We made it 3 blocks before Victor pulled up short and grabbed my arm. "There," he panted, pointing toward a service alley between 2 houses. "That leads to the East Road, cuts the trip to the station in half." We don't know what's back there. Neither do they. I didn't think they needed to know. But I nodded anyway, because we didn't have time. The 5 of us, me, Victor, Mrs. Dillard, the DeMosses, hurled ourselves into the alley. The path was narrow, fenced on both sides, choked with overgrown ivy and garbage bins that hadn't been emptied in weeks. Every sound echoed in the tight corridor. A bottle tipped, something hissed. We kept moving. Halfway through, I glanced up. Rooftops on both sides, flat garage roofs just high enough that we couldn't see what was on them. But I knew. We burst out the far side and into the open, only to find a chain-link gate blocking the exit. A padlock hung useless from the latch, broken long ago, rusted red. Victor slammed his shoulder against it. It held. He backed up, sprinted, and tore through. The gate exploded open. We ran into the street. Then we heard it, not clicking, not skittering, something low, a scrape. No rhythm, no hesitation, something dragging. I spun around. At the mouth of the alley stood something different. Not one of the rooftop crawlers. This thing was bigger. It filled the space from fence to fence, at least 10 feet long, its back hunched and ridged, slick with something dark and glistening. It didn't have legs. It moved on a muscular underbody, dragging its plated form along like a swollen tick. At the front, a mass of tendrils whipped through the air, tasting, hunting. No face, just a circular wet hole surrounded by rows of pulsing red slits that opened and closed like gills. Mrs. Dillard gasped behind me. The creature stopped. It didn't lunge, it didn't chase, it just watched. And then, from within its body, muffled but clear, we heard a voice. My voice. Run, it said. Then again, run, over and over, like a record skipping. Victor grabbed my shoulder. Go, now. We fled. The fire station was still 4 blocks away. We moved fast, but the streets weren't empty. Not anymore. Shapes stirred in the doorways. Long-limbed figures ducked into bushes as we passed. Some of them were tall, too tall, like their knees bent the wrong way to fit into human homes. Some were small, barely the size of a raccoon, but their eyes were the same, black, glossy, watchful. At one point, I saw a man standing in his yard, just standing. He looked at us, confused, not frightened. "Are the sirens off again?" he asked. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because something behind him moved, on his back. A cluster of jointed legs extended from beneath his shirt, clinging to his spine like a parasite. They twitched when he turned his head. He smiled. I ran faster. By the time we saw the fire station's antenna tower poking above the trees, the light had almost fully collapsed into that unnatural twilight. No stars, no moon, just the faint suggestion of direction. The gate around the station was locked, but Victor climbed it in seconds and let us in. The main door was barricaded from the inside. We pounded, shouted, no answer. Then a face appeared in the window. An old man, must have been one of the volunteers. He eyed us for a long moment, then disappeared. We waited. The door finally clicked. He pulled it open, then froze, staring at Mrs. Dillard. She looked down. Her shirt sleeve was wet, dark. She held up her arm. A bite. Not fresh, not deep, but real. Victor backed away. No, we're not doing this. She's not changing, I said. He pointed at the wound. We don't know how it spreads. I've had this since the diner, Mrs. Dillard whispered, and we left Mallory at the diner. Nothing's wrong with me, she snapped. The old man just looked at her, then stepped aside. You come in, he said, but we watch you. She nodded. Fine. We entered the fire station. They'd fortified it well. Metal panels across the windows. Generators still running. One radio still working, barely. The old man handed me the mic. Only gets one band. Emergency shortwave. I pressed the call button. This is Denton Hollow, I said. Does anyone read? Nothing. Static. I tried again. This is Denton Hollow. We're under attack. Does anyone? A click. Then, we read you, but the voice was mine. I dropped the radio. It clattered against the metal cabinet, skidded to the floor. For a moment, no one moved. We just stood there, staring at the speaker as the static returned, soft, low, and crackling like dry leaves. Then the voice came again. My voice. We read you, Ben. It wasn't a recording. Not quite. The cadence was wrong, off by a hair, like someone had studied my speech patterns under a microscope and recreated them with a cracked throat. Victor picked up the mic. Who is this? Silence. Then, we are you. You let us in. The radio went dead. Not a pop, not a whine, just a full absolute stop. Even the generator hum in the walls felt quieter afterward, like the building itself was holding its breath. I backed away from the counter. Shut it off, I muttered. The old man, the station volunteer, was already on it. He yanked the power cord, pulled the batteries, smashed the mic with the heel of his boot for good measure. Even then, we stared at the thing like it might whisper again. They're listening, Victor said. More than that, I replied. They're learning. Mrs. Dillard sat heavily on the bench by the lockers. The light overhead flickered. Her shirt sleeve was rolled up now, the bite wound pale and raised at the edges, like something had swelled underneath. I knelt down and examined it. No spreading veins, no blackened tissue like Mallory. But it was changing, almost pulsing. She didn't seem to notice. You hear it? She asked softly. I froze. Hear what? The heartbeat. Victor stiffened. What heartbeat? Mrs. Dillard didn't blink. It's under the floor. No one moved. Then we heard it. Thump. Just once. Faint. Deep. We waited. Thump. Same rhythm. Too slow for a machine. Too organic for anything man-made. The old man swallowed. It's not the generator. I crossed the room, crouched by the corner where the tile met exposed concrete, pressed my palm to it, and there it was. Warmth, pulse. The floor, the building, was breathing. "They're beneath us," I whispered. "Not just in the walls, not just the roofs. They're in the foundation." Mrs. Dillard was humming now. I turned. Her eyes were shut, face turned upward. "I dreamed of this place last week," she said, "before the sirens even started. But it wasn't a firehouse. It was hollow, no windows, just red light." I thought it was a nightmare. The DeMosses exchanged a look. "You dreamed about this too?" the wife asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, not here, but rooftops. Something looking in the window. Same red sky." Victor turned to me. "It's not just an invasion, it's integration. They're inside our thoughts." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that we were still us, that our minds were our own. But I'd heard my voice on that radio, and it had known my name. The lights overhead flickered again. This time they didn't come back. The emergency fluorescence kicked in, dim red panels embedded into the ceiling corners. They bathed the entire station in that same rust-colored glow we'd seen outside. It didn't feel like backup lighting. It felt like the default. "I don't think the power went out," Victor whispered. "I think we switched systems." "What do you mean?" "I think we're not in Denton Hollow anymore." Silence, then click, not from the walls, not from the ceiling, from below. We turned toward the floor vent near the gear lockers. The grate had warped, just slightly, bent upward, as though pressure from beneath had pushed it out. I stepped forward, crouched beside it. The others stood back, flashlights ready. Beneath the slats, I saw darkness, not just shadow, a deeper dark, thick and wet. Something glistened, something moved. A single long claw slid up through the gap. Not fast, just a test. It tapped the edge of the metal. Click, 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 then slid back down. I stood. "We need to get out of here." "There's nowhere to go," the old man said flatly. I looked out the front window. He was right. The street outside was gone. Where Main Street had been, there was only red, not light, not air. Just a suffocating, endless field of dark red haze. The buildings were silhouettes now, stripped of color and texture, like backdrops painted on paper. And the rooftops, they were alive, moving. Not the creatures, the roofs themselves, breathing, stretching, spines rising like dorsal fins. From above, something massive passed by, a silhouette the size of a warehouse, all legs and ridges and antennae. We ducked away from the glass. Mrs. Dillard was laughing softly now, just under her breath. "The sirens were keeping us grounded," she said, "anchored. That's why they hated them. That's why they stopped them." Victor reached for the door. "We have to try." "You open that door," the old man warned. "You're not going to be in Kansas anymore." Victor hesitated, hand hovering above the bolt. "Then where the hell are we?" The floor pulsed again, and this time we heard dozens of claws in the walls, scraping, clicking, digging. The station was no longer safe. Nowhere was. The scratching intensified, not just from one direction, from all of them. Floor, walls, ceiling, like 100 clawed hands were tunneling in, peeling the building open from every angle. The metal lockers rattled in place. Drywall cracked in thin, jagged lines. The firehouse groaned like an animal in pain. Victor bolted the front door again. His hands were shaking, jaw clenched. "We wait," he said. "If we run out there now, we disappear like the others. We wait for morning." But it wasn't night anymore. Not really. Not when the sky outside had become that suffocating red haze and the town around us had flattened into warped silhouettes. This wasn't the town. Not our town. We'd been pulled into a copy, a reflection made out of heat and blood and rot. The sirens had been the only thing keeping us tethered. They had gone silent. And in the silence, something reached in. Mrs. Dillard was whispering to herself now, over and over. Not a prayer. Just a sequence of words. The rooftops came first, the walls came second, the mind came last. I didn't know if it meant anything. I didn't know if she even knew she was saying it. Then, one of the walls buckled inward. It didn't break. It inhaled. A deep concavity formed in the drywall, like something on the other side had pressed its face against it. gently with curiosity. The room went silent again. Even the scratching stopped. I raised my flashlight and aimed at the dent. Nothing showed. Then, pop. The ceiling panel above the old man blew out. Not violently, just gone, like it had been unhooked. Dust spilled down, and then a face followed. But it wasn't a creature, it was Mallory. She hung upside down from the ceiling, hair swaying gently, bloodless lips pulled into a crooked smile. Her eyes were wide, vacant, but her jaw moved slowly, like a puppet's mouth working through unfamiliar syllables. "They like it here," she whispered. "So many warm places to grow." Victor backed away, one arm across Mrs. Dillard's chest to hold her still. The old man lifted his pistol, ancient rust-flecked, and pointed it upward. "Don't you come in here," he growled. "Don't you bring that in here?" Mallory just smiled wider. Then her head retreated, no sound, no warning, gone, and immediately after, thud, from beneath the floor. Thud, closer. The concrete cracked at the seams, dust puffed up through the tile grout. A single line split through the floor like a lightning bolt frozen in stone. The heart beneath us was rising. "We need the roof," I said. "Now." "No way," Victor muttered. "We go up there, we're surrounded. Trapped." I turned to him. "We're already trapped, but the antenna's up there. If we can get a signal out." The old man was already moving. "Roof hatches in the garage. Come on." We bolted for the side door. The garage was cold, darker than the rest of the station, with red safety lights casting long shadows across the fire engine. As we passed it, I noticed the windshield was cracked. Not smashed, torn like something had slid across it with claws. The hatch was above a steel maintenance rack. I climbed first, prying the latch with a crowbar. It opened too easily. Outside, the rooftop was flat and coated in gravel, windless, still. The antenna tower rose 10 feet above us, wrapped in metal braces and a rusted ladder. But the sky was churning. It no longer looked like sky at all, just layers of red tissue pulsing with veins of black. Stars flickered behind it like pinholes torn in a curtain. The clouds weren't clouds anymore. They moved wrong. Slow rolls of flesh, not vapor. And along the rooftops of Denton Hollow, the creatures stood. Hundreds, lined up like gargoyles, all of them facing us. I turned back and pulled the others through the hatch. Victor climbed the antenna first, climbing fast, yanking a cable from his backpack. "Emergency beacon. Still got charge. If we hit the right frequency, maybe." The tower groaned, then it twitched. He stopped climbing. We all stared. The top of the antenna bent forward. No wind, just movement, like it had just looked down at him. He scrambled down. Nope. It's not a tower anymore. The old man knelt beside the firehouse vent. "Look." We turned. A pale steam, barely visible, was rising from the gap between the metal slats, a fog curling upward. When it passed near my hand, the hair on my arm stood straight up. Victor's eyes widened. "The fog, it's alive." Mrs. Dillard stood now at the edge of the roof looking across the skyline. She pointed. "They're not just on roofs anymore." We followed her finger. The town was changing. Houses melted into spires, roads twisted like arteries, trees pulsed as though drawing breath. The creatures, once crawling, skittering, watching, were standing upright now. Limbs straightened, heads tilted, not humanoid, just vertical, as if adapting, becoming part of the landscape. I staggered backward. We're not in our town. Not anymore. We're in theirs. The radio crackled at my waist. No one had touched it. No one had turned it on. But it spoke, in all of our voices layered over each other. One heartbeat, one home. "You are welcome." Then, from every rooftop, they began to crawl toward us. They moved like a tide, hundreds of them, no thousands, crawling over rooftops, slithering down walls, unfolding from chimneys and gutters. Some leapt effortlessly across gaps between buildings. Others poured like liquid shadows through vents and cracks, stretching limbs into impossible shapes to squeeze through the architecture of a town that no longer belonged to us. And they were silent. No howls, no screeches, no warning. The only sound was the heartbeat. Thump! From beneath us, it pulsed like a war drum, slower now but heavier, resonating through the firehouse roof, traveling up my spine into my teeth. And with each beat, the air around us thickened, pulsing like the lungs of something huge and unseen just beneath the surface. Victor dropped his beacon. It skittered across the rooftop and came to rest near the hatch. "I can't get a signal," he said, breathless. "Whatever's above us, it's pressing down. No frequencies can get through." "It's not pressing," I said quietly. "It's feeding." He looked at me. "They wanted us to run up here," I said. "There's nowhere else to go, nowhere left to fall." All around us, the skyline of Denton Hollow blurred, houses twisted into grotesque towers, roads stretched like melted plastic, trees split at the trunks, sprouting antenna-like branches that swayed in a wind we couldn't feel. And beneath all of it, writhing just under the ground, was that heartbeat. "Where's Mrs. Dillard?" the old man asked. She wasn't beside us anymore. We turned in unison and saw her at the edge of the rooftop, arms out, eyes wide. A figure stood across from her on the opposite rooftop, not crawling, not crouching, standing. Its limbs were thin and pale, stretched far beyond human proportions. Its torso was a mass of bone-white plates, overlapping like shingles, and its head, it wore her face. Not a mask, not a trick. It was growing her face, a half-formed replication, lips twitching, hair like wet moss. It blinked once, twice, then smiled, and Mrs. Dillard stepped forward. "No!" I shouted, reaching out. But she didn't hesitate. She walked straight off the edge, and didn't fall. She floated, lifted slowly like she had become a part of the air itself, limbs unraveling, face stretching wide, not in terror but in peace, like she had simply been waiting for this moment. The figure across from her opened its arms. She dissolved in its light, gone. Victor backed away, eyes wide with horror. She was infected. We brought her with us. "No," I said. "She chose them." The clicking began again, louder this time, echoing from every direction. The creatures surrounded us now, perched on every ledge, crawling up the tower behind us, one leg at a time. They didn't lunge, they didn't speak, they waited. "What do they want?" the Demos wife whispered. The sky above split, not like clouds parting, like flesh tearing. Through the gap came something massive, no shape, just presence, an impossibility framed by the stars, unfurling like a parasite stretching in its shell. Its body was made of writhing rooftops, chimneys, spires, and faces. Human faces, smiling, blinking, open-mouthed, all of them watching us. It spoke without speaking. No sound, just the words forming inside our heads like memories we'd forgotten we had. "You were never alone." The old man raised his pistol. "Back, back!" He fired once. The sound was devoured before it reached the end of the roof. Then the weapon turned red hot in his hand. He dropped it with a scream. The beacon next to me clicked on. No one had touched it. It pulsed once, then again, a third time, matching the heartbeat below. I grabbed it, turned it toward the tower, aimed it upward. "Victor," I shouted, "give me the flare." He hesitated. "What good is that gonna do?" "Light," I said. "They hate light. You saw what it did in the diner." He ripped the flare from his belt, tossed it to me. I struck it against the antenna's rusted base. It roared to life. A screaming column of magnesium-white fire burst from the flare and ignited the space around us with blinding brilliance. The creatures reeled. Every one of them staggered back, limbs spasming. The tower behind me shook violently, plates of metal sloughing off like dead skin. One of them screeched, not from pain, from confusion. Then it spoke, in my voice. "Ben." I turned. It stood 10 feet away, one of the tall ones, body shimmering with half-formed mouths. "Ben," it said again, "come back inside. It's warm here." It smiled with teeth that weren't quite finished forming. The old man screamed, grabbed a crowbar, and charged. He hit it across the chest. It didn't flinch. Instead, it folded in on itself, literally inverting, limbs twisting backward, torso collapsing. Its face split down the middle, revealing nothing but depthless red tissue. And from within it whispered, "You'll never leave." The flare in my hand was dying. Victor reached for another. Too late. The flare hissed, flickered, and went out. Instantly, the red haze returned. The air thickened, and the creatures moved. They descended. No time for a last stand. No time to fight. Only time to choose. I turned toward the beacon, clutched it to my chest, and jumped from the roof. The air didn't catch me. The creatures didn't stop me. I hit the ground, and everything went white. I woke up in a hospital bed, alone. No bandages, no IVs, just sunlight through the window. Real sunlight, blue sky. A nurse came in, smiled. "You're awake, good. You've been unconscious for 6 days. Where am I?" I croaked. "Denton General." My mouth went dry. Is the town okay?" Her smile didn't change. "We evacuated everyone. You were found outside the firehouse. There was a storm, a chemical spill. You've been hallucinating." I stared at her, and I knew she was lying because she blinked wrong. Twice in one eye, once in the other. And as she turned to leave, I saw it. A small wet crack running down the back of her neck, pulsing like a mouth waiting to open. Final broadcast. Recovered from emergency frequency 121.7 MHz. Unverified origin, Denton Hollow, timestamp unknown. If you're hearing this, don't listen to the sirens. Don't listen to the people. Don't even trust yourself. They're inside the walls, the ceilings, the sky. This isn't a warning. It's too late for that. It's just the last thing I can say before they take my voice too. If the sky turns red, run, and don't look at the rooftops. End of transmission.